Hello, Bobby Torres of Frightbox Recording here. So the question is this: do you find that your mixes sound really harsh and almost like ice picks are attacking your eardrums, especially when comparing your mixes to your favorite pro records? Well, if this is you, you're going to want to pay attention and learn all 4 of these key high frequency management techniques that I share within this simple tutorial. Let's discuss. So before we dive into today's simple tutorial, I just want to let you know that people send me their mixes all of the time. And if there's one common thread that I hear over and over and over again, it's a simple misunderstanding of basic EQ and compression. People get hung up on plugin selection, outboard gear, fancy mix tricks, when in reality, so much of the quality of your mix depends on how well you understand, again, basic EQ and compression. And I don't want this for you. I want you to produce better results with the gear you already have in your studio and the plugins that you already have in your studio. And because of this, I put together my crisp and clear heavy mix formula. The Crisp and Clear Heavy Mix Formula is a straightforward PDF guide that contains all of my starting points for basic EQ and compression settings on all of the main instruments within a heavy production. It's a PDF guide that you could download and refer to, and within the PDF there are clickable links to private tutorials where I demonstrate these exact techniques, and I've also included a multi-track download so you can mix the exact same files that I'm mixing along with me. And then what you can do is take these techniques and apply them to your own music so you can achieve great results immediately without having to buy and spend money on new gear or plugins. The Crisp and Clear Heavy Mix Formula is absolutely free right now, and you can have instant access by clicking the link below in this video's description. So one thing that I often hear, and was something that I struggled with a lot when starting out, is just the overall issue of harsh mixes. You know, when you hear a pro mix, often it's bright and clear, but pleasing to listen to. And I always wondered back then, how do they achieve mixes that are so clear, but don't attack me and attack my eardrums when I crank up the mix in my car or on my phone or on my stereo system? And even though I struggled throughout the years thinking it was my converters, I was using cheap microphones, I needed new drum software, what I eventually learned is that I simply did not understand how to handle the high frequencies in my mix. It was a mismanagement of my high frequencies. And I found that there are 4 key areas that make a massive difference when it comes to handling your high frequencies in your mix, and that'll help you achieve that nice warm mix that's also clear. And in this video, I break down these 4 areas, and I think you're gonna find the 4th one really, really interesting because I'm sure you probably haven't heard it anywhere else. Tip number 1 is handling the high frequencies on your leads or distorted guitar overdubs. I'm gonna play an audio sample back here for you, and I want you to pay close attention to the lead guitar sound, and then we're gonna dive deep into the EQ on this particular lead guitar, and we'll see what we have. Let's check it out. So what you just heard is a simple guitar solo that's, of course, alongside some rhythm guitars. And the mistake that so many of us make is that we try to make our lead guitars just as bright as our rhythm guitars. We have to remember, guitars, distorted guitars, are harmonically rich. There's so much going on within the inherent sounds themselves that if you boost high end and you don't get rid of high end on the extra guitar tracks, they are going to heavily clash in the mix with your cymbals, rhythm guitars, and even your vocals, and maybe even synths if you have some synths or keyboards in your mixes. So let's hear the rhythm guitar sound that I have going on in this mix. So the rhythm guitar sound already has enough high end, so I'm not gonna be able to get away with having as much high end on my leads. And here's the thing, you're not gonna notice it if you reduce the high end on your lead guitars because your ear is gonna be drawn to them because it's mainly focused in on the mid-range. We already have tons of highs going on with the cymbals and the rhythm guitars and even the vocals to a certain extent that, again, the highs on the leads will just clash with the rhythms. So let's hear the solos in solo and hear what they sound like on their own. So the main solo track here, if you notice, very simple EQ. I'm rolling off all frequencies above 6.5K. In other words, all of that fizz that would normally happen at 9, 10, 11, and 12K is just not there. And it helps keep the leads focused in the mid-range. And again, so those unnecessary highs don't accumulate in my mix and nothing clashes in that area. And I'm bringing up lead guitars because that's one thing I hear a lot when people send me their mixes, that all of their overdubs are super fizzy and super bright, and it's just fighting with the cymbals and rhythm guitars and everything else. Do not be scared to remove more high end from your leads than you'd think. All right, now the second area where people seem to mismanage high end are screaming vocal tracks, especially if you are recording your vocals with a condenser microphone. Now, I'm more of a fan of recording harsh vocals or screaming vocals with a dynamic mic like the SM7B or Shure SM57 or an SM58. But even when using a dynamic mic, which is naturally a lot more mellow in the top end, I still have to make sure that I manage my high end in my scream tracks properly. I've had people tell me they even boost the high end in their scream tracks. I also want to mention this, if you're recording more of like a hardcore kind of thing where it's more shouty style vocals, this isn't going to be as much of an issue. But if you're recording vocals that have a lot of gargle and a lot of harshness, you're going to want to pay close attention to the high end. So here's my trick. It's extremely straightforward. Back in the day when I used to struggle with this in my home studio when I first got started, I used to think that I needed a better microphone, a better mic preamp, outboard gear, better plugins, when in reality, I just needed to EQ my vocal properly. Let's listen to the vocals and pay close attention to the timbre of the voice as a whole, and then we'll dive into the EQ and the high frequency management trick that I'm using on my vocal EQ. Let's check it out. So if you notice here, in the high end, I'm actually reducing with a high shelf filter, and I'm using high shelf filter for a very specific reason. I'm reducing all frequencies pretty much above 8K by a substantial amount, by 10 dB. Now, most people don't think to do this because you'd think if you're reducing high frequencies like that, it's gonna make the vocals sound muddy. And in my experience, yes, that is the case if you're using something like a low pass filter and you're completely removing those frequencies entirely. But in this case, that's not what I'm doing. I'm going in there and just reducing the gargle and the super high frequencies that are actually not part of the fundamental frequency response of a scream vocal. So I'm gonna play the vocals in solo, and I'm gonna intermittently bypass the high shelf filter and pay close attention to what's being reintroduced in the vocal track as I bypass that filter.
Searching for a way out! Escaping escape!
If you notice, once I bypass the filter, there's a lot of extra high frequency content that's just gonna end up clashing with the cymbals and even the high end of the rhythm guitars to a certain extent. So if you're struggling with scream vocals and they're sounding extra harsh and like they're just not sitting right in the mix, use a high shelf filter and reduce the highs above like 8K, 9K, 10K. You're not gonna notice it in the mix, and it's gonna make your vocals sound 20,000 times more smooth. You don't need a fancy microphone, you don't need a fancy preamp, you don't need outboard gear. It's all baloney. Okay, this leads me to tip number 3, and that's managing the high frequencies on your bass properly. Let's take a quick listen to this audio sample, and I will dive deep into exactly what I'm talking about. So in my opinion, that's a nice, crisp and clear, clanky bass tone. And to someone who's starting out, you might think there's a ton of high end going on that bass tone, right? Because it's clear and clanky, there must be a lot of high end. It's actually not the case. I'm rolling off all frequencies above 5K because here's the thing. Most frequencies on a bass guitar above 4 or 5K are just noise. It's not like a guitar where there are gonna be some nice harmonics sometimes up there. With bass, generally, it's just gonna be frequencies that are not adding to the bass sound, and it's not gonna make your bass sound any more bright. It's just gonna add extra harshness and a lot of extra noise in those high frequencies that, again, are gonna make your mix sound harsh overall. Remember, a mix is all about balance and how these components work together. And the cymbals being nice and clear is what's gonna help make the mix sound clear and bright and crisp. And if you notice the theme so far, I'm only leaving specific instruments, mainly the cymbals, in that super duper high frequency range to avoid this fighting and clashing. Okay, this leads me to the big one that most people, I don't even know if I've really heard anyone mention this on the internet, but I know pros definitely do it, and it's simple. It's rolling off all of the super duper top on most of your drum tracks that are not your cymbal tracks. Now, this is more important today in the digital realm where we're not using analog equipment. Here's what happened in analog back in the day when you would record onto a tape machine. The tape naturally would soften high end, and then all of the transformers and even maybe some of the tubes that your tracks would be ran through naturally throughout your signal chain, again, would naturally soften the transients and often reduce the super duper highs naturally without the producers and engineers having to do anything. The problem when we're recording in our home studios is that our gear is actually, from a technical standpoint, too good. It's too clean. So when you record drums, you end up with a lot of extra high frequency content on your drum shells that are actually very plasticky sounding and unappealing and will actually add harshness to your mixes. When I listen back to a lot of my old productions, I cannot believe how plastic and harsh the drums sound. And back in the day, I thought it was simply because I wasn't using, nice preamps. I wasn't using any outboard gear. I thought I was using cheap microphones, and that's what was causing that plasticky, harsh sound on my snare, kick, and toms. When in reality, all I really had to do was reduce or remove the super duper top end on my shells to achieve that more organic, more analog, and more warm sounding drum tracks. Just a side note here, if you use programmed drums that are already really processed at the source, a lot of times these companies have done a great job doing this already for you, or maybe they've recorded the drums through really nice analog gear where this process is happening naturally. But if you're like me, and if you're recording drums in a basic Project Studio with like a USB interface or something like that, you're gonna wanna handle the super duper high frequencies on your drums. A lot of times when people send me their tracks, I hear a lot of clickiness and a lot of annoying stuff happening above 10K on their shells, and there's an easy fix for it. And you ready? All you need is a stock EQ. Just use a low pass filter and get rid of everything above around 9 to 10K. You're not really gonna notice it in the mix, and it's gonna be an extra step to help eliminate all of that harshness that may exist within your mix. Let's listen to these drum tracks. So this was a drum kit recorded in my basic Project Studio. And again, I'm using this filtering at 10K just to get rid of all that annoying clickety-clackety stuff in the top end that I don't need. And as a side note, I wanna mention this. You don't wanna do this to your cymbals. This is only for your kick drum, snare drum, and toms. And I like to do this on my drums submix because I actually don't send my cymbals to my drum submix, only the shells. And I do it all in one go instead of having to do it on the individual tracks. But you can do it on the individual tracks. You could do it on your kick drum, on your snare drum, and your toms as well. I've even seen someone like Jens Bogren doing this exact same thing when he struggles with this issue, because we all struggle with this issue in the digital realm where mixes are sounding just too clean because our technology is just too good, to be honest with you. So there you have it. Those are 4 high frequency management tips that are gonna help eliminate that harshness that you probably deal with in your mixes. And especially the 4th one, I don't hear people mentioning on the internet. And I would love to know, are you guilty of not applying these 4 techniques to your own productions? Let me know by leaving a comment in the comment section below. I'd love to hear what you've been up to in your home studio. And again, if you like to improve the sound of your mixes and you don't have a firm grasp on basic EQ and compression, you could have instant access for absolutely free to my crisp and clear heavy mix formula. The Heavy Mix Formula is a straightforward PDF guide that contains all of my starting points for basic EQ and compression on all the main instruments within a heavy production. The PDF guide contains clickable links to private tutorials where you could watch me implement these techniques in real time. And each tutorial comes with a simple multi-track download so you could practice the exact same techniques that I'm sharing with you with the exact files that I'm using, therefore being able to take these techniques and apply them to your own mixes and your own music. I want you to achieve killer results with the gear and plugins you're already using, and the crisp and clear heavy mix formula is definitely going to set you in the right direction. If you found this video helpful, like, comment, subscribe, and share. And do not forget to click the little bell icon so you can be notified every single time I upload weekly videos on all things metal and rock production. Till next time, happy mixing.